Hey y'all, it's Mary Hyatt, and I'm so excited you're here for this month's topic, which is all about relationships. Whether you're in a current relationship or you're single, you're going to want to tune in. Now, we are rewinding the clock to take a look at our relationship blueprints. How did they form? Where are they dysfunctional? And what we can do about it. And my hope is that this month you're going to gain some insights to make your relationships more fulfilling, more intimate, and ultimately more soul satisfying. So join me and let's start the conversation.
Welcome to the Living Fully Alive podcast with Mary Hyatt, here to help you find your authentic voice, learn how to love yourself, and embrace your life. And now, your host, life and mindset coach, body love advocate, and doTERRA Presidential Diamond, Mary Hyatt.
Hey everybody, it is Mary, and I am so excited about today's episode because I have a very special guest who is an expert in attachment theory. Y'all, this conversation will literally blow your mind. You are going to want to take so many notes. You're going to be self-diagnosing yourself and all your friends after this episode. It's like a self-development dream episode. But my guest is Dominique Gabrielle Braden, and she lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and she has worked in a variety of therapeutic settings and held positions with qualifications in marriage and family therapy, behavioral intervention, community mental health, and family-focused therapy. And she provides behavioral-focused support and systematic treatment to individuals, to families, and also in a variety of community settings. Her specialties foster the development of complex attachment issues, which is what we get into in today's conversation. And she adapts the attachment-focused therapy and experiential therapy and just instills this insight and tools to foster healing and freedom for her clients. She has an amazing private practice here in Nashville. She also sees people teletherapeutically. Is that how you say it? Basically online. But her practice primarily focus on complex men issues, women issues, and promotes this healing of relational and transnational wounds that are experienced by all walks of life. So, like I said, grab a notebook, grab a pen, because you are going to want to take a lot of notes in today's conversation. So without further ado, here is my interview with Dominique. Hey everybody, it is Mary, and I am so excited about my conversation today because we have another amazing guest who is, as you guys just heard, a therapist and is what I like to consider an expert in this attachment theory. And over the past several weeks on the podcast, we've been talking kind of more generally about relationships. We've talked about intimacy. We've talked about, Lindsley and I talked about adult dating. And then last week we got into more of some of those concepts and tips on how to create a relationship that lasts and can endure kind of whatever gets thrown at a relationship. And I thought one of the things that would be helpful for y'all is to get into a topic known as attachment theory. It's something that for me personally, as I have navigated my adult relationship after divorce, it was something that I had no clue about when I was married. And I wished I would, because I can look back and rewind the clock and see so many obvious just behavioral patterns that would have helped me tremendously had I had this knowledge. And now in my relationship with Bentley, I am putting this into practice. I am learning about how I operate inside of relationships based on the way that I was raised and some of the things that were coping strategies from early on. And so this week we have an amazing therapist, Dominique, who's going to be with us and share what she has learned in relationships and how she uses attachment theory to help her clients. And I'm sure it's amazingly helpful in your own life as well. So welcome to the show, Dominique. So glad to have you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so I want to jump straight into it because I know that for my listeners, obviously they're going to go, okay, this woman is an expert. She is a therapist, but I want to just make this human for a second. And I want people to get to know you a little bit. So if you could just take us on a journey and let us know, have you always been into therapy, working with people? Has this been a constant interest? And take us on the journey of how you became a therapist.
Definitely. So this is truly a calling for me. I do believe that early on in my childhood, I really witnessed my mother actually struggle with some mental health issues. And I always was just drawn to helping people and really figuring out why our brains really react in this functional way. So I think initially that was something that always just kind of created curiosity in my mind. So I just knew, I think from the age, it had to be at least 12, like this was what I was called to do.
That's awesome. I feel like it's rare, you think about a 12-year-old, it's like usually you want to be a teacher or a nurse or a doctor or, and so to have that clarity. And I always say that usually the work that we do as adults is because it's the medicine that we need.
Yeah.
It's like, I know that I'm a coach because I've needed the work that I do now. I've needed to go in and heal trauma inside of myself and in my life experience. And so it's just beautiful to get to see, like, even in some of those hard situations that we go through early on, that ends up being our vocation, our purpose.
Yes. I love that you said purpose, because I really think that the nature of what we will kind of discuss and really get in today really kind of peels back the layers and really looks at those prominent times in our life where we're really drawn to relationships, or we've really created narrative from relationships that then goes back to our purpose.
Yeah, totally. It really is like such a connection. And when you go back and you rewind and you look back over your history, it's like, oh, that makes sense. It makes sense that I'm doing this work because this happened to me, or this was challenging for me, or this was a trauma that I experienced. And I want to dive into this concept of attachment theory. There are so many great books that have been written about this. I think for people who are in the therapeutic space, i.e. you've got a therapist or you've got a coach, it's probably come up in conversation. But unless you're someone like us who does this work professionally and you geek out about it, you probably haven't studied it. So if you could just break it down in layman's terms, what is attachment theory?
Yes. So attachment theory is the nature at which we relate to some of our most primary attachments. So that means that the nature at which we have meaning or relationship with our parents, our siblings, and then in our adulthood, it's probably going to transcribe back to our partner, which I think is really interesting. So if you may have an anxious attachment with your mother or your father, that does not necessarily mean that you'll have an anxious attachment with your spouse or your husband or your wife. Yes. So I think that's like one of the most interesting facts, is that it can shift, but you may also be in kind of two places at once.
Okay, because in my mind, like when I think of it, it's like, let's say that you're a baby and your mother didn't give you what you needed. Like, let's say you were hungry or you needed to be coddled or touched or something like this. And your parent, your primary caregiver, wasn't giving you whatever that need was. Then based out of that, you develop this response.
Yes.
It's almost like I almost think of it like a survival response. And either you go, okay, I'm either going to, handle this by myself, avoidant, take care of my own needs, or I'm going to become anxious and nervous about it. And then, really, and I'm so glad you're bringing this up. I thought it was like, that's what you have, like forever and for always. You're going to be the avoidant one. You're going to be the anxious one, and it can't be changed. So to me, that's really hopeful.
Yes, I think that's a very great point. So I might, from the world of marriage and family therapy, characterize that as a functional response, which means that it serves a function. So in being fearful of someone or that relationship, that's a functional response, meaning at one point in your life, you needed that to survive.
Right.
So sometimes when we no longer need it, it can still show up. And I think in adulthood, we acknowledge it because we're always kind of mirroring that in relationships, so we can then see it. But what's really unique is that when you might join with someone who mirrors secure attachment, you then may no longer need your functional response.
Okay, this makes total sense. Like now I'm like, okay, yeah, because if you are not in the same pattern that you were in when you were a child, you don't need that set of skills. You don't need that defense mechanism anymore, because all of a sudden that relationship, the dynamic is shifted and it's now more safe or more secure. So, and I know we're kind of jumping ahead, and I want to make sure we get like the fundamentals for people who aren't familiar with this. So when we talk about attachment theory, and especially as adults, and because this is primarily, the come from and the work that you do, why is it so helpful for us to understand what our style is? Like, what's the benefit of having this kind of knowledge?
Yes. So I think that the primary benefit is awareness of self, awareness of why you do what you do, awareness of how you view the world, because that is going to be the basics or the foundation for better understanding and health in a relationship. So it's going to start with that individual. So I think when you bring two individuals together, we don't necessarily become one, like we have all kind of, connected with that saying.
Right.
We are still two people who are functioning from these, again, functional responses or these experiences. And when we're able to have that awareness of ourself, we can then function more in a healthy way when we are in the relationship.
That makes total sense. And I think you're right. I mean, all the work that I love to do is about upping that level of self-awareness, like helping us understand whether it's the Enneagram, whether it is, all the other things we geek out about, and it's like, oh, now I know my default. Kind of now I know where I tend to go under stress, for example. Like when I think about the Enneagram, it's like, oh, like when I'm in a stressful position, I go to this lower level. For me, I'm at Enneagram 2. So I go to 8 and I get defensive and I want to, put up my walls and my defenses. And so with attachment theory, I think what's so cool about this is that in the same way, it's like, what I feel like you're saying is we begin to see our patterns, and that gives us the option. Is this working?
Yes.
Is it not working? Do I need to change it?
Yes. Yes. I absolutely love the Enneagram. And I just have to kind of second, if you are at a place where you feel like you understand the principles of attachment theory or just attachment and the nature of just human beings, I think the Enneagram is a great tool to explore that.
Oh, I mean, like, you'll get in a deep hole with the Enneagram. I feel like I could just spend hours and hours researching it. I love it so much.
Yes.
Okay, so what are the signs? Like if I'm trying to self-diagnose myself here and I want to know, okay, all right, there's these three kind of basic types, right? Anxious, attached, avoidant, attached, secure, attached. So how do I know if I'm anxious? Like what are the signs that I can look for to go, oh yeah, I'm probably fall into that category?
Those that are typically more anxiously attached, they may have a huge desire and passion for connectiveness. However, this can show up when the person disengages from them. So let's say you're in a relationship and then sporadically, those texts just kind of slowly stop coming through. That, if you experience kind of a heightened sense of anxiety and you have some fear about whether or not that person is going to return, that could be a sign that you have more of an anxious attachment.
Yeah. And I would say, at least in this relationship that I'm in currently, that's for sure been my style. Like that, almost like insecurity. Like, are they coming back? Are they distancing themselves? And what that says about me too. Like, then I think sometimes we turn that on ourselves. Like, well, then there's something must be wrong with me. And my therapist always, she says, well, when you act out, so for me as an anxious attached person, when I act out, that acting out, and that could be asking a lot of questions, it could be snooping, it could be trying to get information, it could be picking a fight to create connection. It could be all these different things. So when I'm in that behavior, she said, this is your bid for connection. This is your way, even though maybe it's a little dysfunctional or sideways, this is your way of bidding for connection, like trying to get there to be some kind of conversation or intimacy or connection. And again, I think there's healthy ways of going about that and unhealthy ways. But as an anxious attached person myself, and I should maybe say like recovering from that, I've done a lot of work around it, but like, I think that it's like, constant, like on alert, like hyper alert.
Yes.
Okay, so talk to us about avoidant attached, because this feels like it's probably a little bit opposite, right?
Yes, I have to say that it is opposite, but it's very unique in the sense where the anxious attached is definitely craving connection or attention. An avoidant attached individual might have more security in themselves. So that may mean that in relationships, those that could be more conversational or more engaging, that would cause them to shut down. In the therapy world, we call it withdrawing. So that can look like, let's just kind of saying, being ghosted or left on red. When someone is avoidantly attached, sometimes they have a fear that their identity or their self-worth can be overshadowed in a sense of a relationship.
Okay, so maybe part of what they fear is like being swallowed up by the relationship.
Being swallowed up. But I think the other component is some may not have experienced healthy attachment or secure attachment, so they really never felt secure or connected. So it's almost in not having a skill of being able to connect with others because that need or that emotional function was not met by the mother or the father early on in their life.
Okay, so like relationship isn't the safe place for them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay,
Work, different voids that we can sometimes get lost in. Work can be their identity. They can get really lost in those things that they feel has to characterize them as individuals.
That's so interesting. Yeah, it's a way of like leaving an unsafe kind of situation. And if you haven't had a positive experience of a relationship where you go, oh, this is amazing. And, you think about if you've never experienced the benefits, the quote unquote benefits of a relationship, like the dopamine hit or the sense of safety and security or things like that. Well, yeah, that's not going to be the place that you run. I mean, that's going to be like, no, that feels unsafe. So, okay, this is so interesting. As I'm thinking, and this is a little bit off script, but like, typically, when I think about men and women, the dynamic of the male-female role, I think we could probably make a gross generalization that women maybe tend to be more anxious, men tend to be more avoidant. Although I think that's probably actually not maybe true, but that's usually like the generalization that we think like, oh, men are more aloof. Maybe they don't call. Maybe they play the game. Maybe they're fine being alone. And women are more needy. They are more needing to create connection. They're quick to text back. They're really available. All of that. Do you see that in your practice, or is it kind of like a hodgepodge across the board, male and female? Real quick before we finish today's episode, I am so excited to share a new resource with you. I have created a quick date night questions PDF guide, and it's yours all for free. Y'all, I know that creating honesty and intimacy in a relationship is a little bit harder than it sounds, and sometimes we need help to invite our relationships into a deeper level. So I've created 10 questions you and your partner can ask each other on your regular date nights. So follow the link below or head on over to maryhyatt.com/date night to snag your PDF question guide to pull out on your next date. All right, so back to this week's episode.
Yeah, generally it actually balances out.
Okay.
I have seen couples come in where the female partner is definitely withdrawn and he may be more pursuing and really maybe the one that even reached out. So a lot of times it can be about 50-50, but I think the awareness is definitely the key, not necessarily the role or the gender roles that could come up, but I think the awareness in that couple unit, because the change is going to happen by togetherness and not necessarily, let's say, I think that the anxious partner may really do a great job of forming questions and really being passionate, but that person may have to learn how to step back and allow that other person to lead.
Ugh. As an anxious attached, I'm just like, oh, I hate that feeling. But you're so right. I mean, it's like, can I tolerate this discomfort of pulling back? And that has been a huge thing for me to learn, is that finding safety in stepping back and creating space, even though for me in my past that has felt like, oh no, I'm opening up this like exit for them to leave and to abandon me, right? That kind of like fear of that abandonment. And the more I've learned to tolerate that discomfort of this is uncomfortable, this is scary. And then what happens is it creates a space for the avoidant to come to me. And it's really kind of a cool dynamic that happens. But there's a third option, the golden, standard that I think we're all hoping to move towards. And that's the secure attached. So tell me a little bit about that. What does that look like?
For sure. Secure attachment, I think if we look at it, the sense of the infant and the mother, it's you can leave this room and I know that you'll be back for me. You can leave and I know that when you come back, you will meet my emotional, my physical, all of those needs are going to be met by you. And if we look at it more so in the sense of an adult relationship, it looks like we can both have concerns or opinions and emotions, and it can be received by the other person or other party. It also looks like connection at a very present level. So I think that means in being able to kind of come together and identify your problems as a couple and not necessarily kind of putting it off on the other. So I think in some of the attachment styles, the individual is very much struggling or is very much kind of coping through this internal narrative. But when you are securely attached, the relationship is transformational and you're really able to understand and get and receive the needs that you have, number one, as an individual, but then also as a couple too.
I just love that idea because I think what we think of, at least for me, when I think of securely attached, there's not a whole lot of focus on what that looks like as it relates to the relationship. Like I can think about, okay, I can manage my own energy. If I'm secure, I can manage, like if my partner leaves and has maybe other hobbies or other friends and I'm not always there 24/7 with them, that I can hold the space for that. And then I can encourage that and get excited for them about that, kind of like that interdependence. But I think what's beautiful about what we were talking about is what does it look like in a secure relationship to navigate together through that?
Yes.
So I would imagine that most people who come into your office probably aren't at the place of having a secure relationship, maybe or themselves or that dynamic between the partners. So is there ever a point when you go, you're just going to be stuck in this and there's no getting out of it and you're sort of like sentenced to being anxious forever or avoidant forever? Or do you feel like in the work that you've done, there's always hope and maybe this can evolve and change regardless?
Yes, great question. So I think, so I'm going to break this down in the best way that I know how. So the therapeutic relationship is the model and the structure of a secure relationship.
Okay.
Or secure attachment. So when they come into the room or when you join, let's say, with someone who is secure, you are still able to learn like different ways of being able to be secure or be attached in a healthy way. Now, I always kind of go back to family therapy and family of origin because that's really where we learn how to interact and respond to the world. So I think those pieces, if let's say a youth has experienced or an adult has experienced abandonment,
right,
then those pieces may have to be worked on throughout their adult life, especially if the abandonment was in form of maybe a parental death or just abandonment in its sense of its own. So sometimes those patterns do still need to be worked on in order to like lean towards a secure relationship. Mm-hmm. But again, you can be securely attached and have attachment wounds.
Okay, that's good.
Yes, so I think attachment wounds really opens up kind of a complex way of looking at attachment because you can, again, have a very secure style and have wounds that go back to family of origin.
Okay, so that's, I think, such an important distinction because it's almost like maybe letting go of us identifying with we are an anxious attached person or avoidant attached person and recognize that maybe it's just that we have these wounds that just like, I mean, God, everything, it's like goes back to childhood and you have this moment where you get triggered about something and you get to work through it. And I like the idea that this is ongoing work because it's not sort of like you arrive at this place. I think that's unrealistic kind of idea of perfectionism to like get to this place where you're just secure 24/7 all the time, but this idea that like, yeah, you can be mostly secure and still have these moments where you get triggered and you go, ooh, that's a wound. Like I just touched on something soft and raw.
Yes.
Gosh, yeah. I'm just like having all these moments of recognizing, yeah, that's so been the case in my life. And even with my clients, seeing when those moments happen. And then I would imagine like there's a way of like, how can I get back to feeling secure?
Yes.
So how do you help walk somebody back to that place of like, let's say they have this wound, they get triggered, it's showing up. How do they kind of like work back to, I'm safe, I'm okay?
Yeah, for sure. So individually, it's awareness of those triggers. So we might go back into family of origin first.
Okay.
And then we may see how the present begins to manifest all of those historical concerns, family of origin pieces. However, let's say if a couple comes in, the goal is to do it together and to have that togetherness and to be aware of each other's kind of moves on the dance floor is what I call it, because the relationship is a dance. So that really characterizes awareness of self and then of awareness of your partner.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just thinking like, depending on whatever conflict you're dealing with. And I mean, so much to me of the success of a relationship is how you navigate challenge, how you navigate conflict, disagreement, whatever it might be. And I would imagine that depending on what styles are kind of pairing up together, that conflict looks different, i.e. the solution might be a little bit different. Like I'm thinking if two anxious attached styles come together, I mean, they're going to handle conflict very differently than two avoidants who come together, or an avoidant and a secure, attached and secure. I mean, there's like, you could go around and around. So let's just talk about this. And this is kind of like that self-diagnosis. I'm thinking of my listeners and they're going, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm anxious. Pretty sure my significant other is anxious. And they get into conflict. What does that conflict look like? And how do they, as anxious, like move through that? What do they need from each other to get through the conflict?
Yes. So I really look at that as two very passionate and evolved, expressive individuals in the room. And I think the best thing when that dynamic kind of shows up is to give each other the space and the time. So, okay, this is my time to talk. This is your time to talk. Let's really get out these feelings, but in an appropriate way where the conflict is actually productive. So that's in learning different communication styles and different tools that are going to help you navigate conflict, number one. But number two, also in kind of going back into that other partners or that partner's family of origin to understand where the passion and maybe desire comes from.
I think that's so beautiful to seek to understand, like, where is this coming from? And I mean, from a real, like, and I really mean compassionate place of understanding your partner's journey, that we don't just sort of willfully decide that we're going to be anxious. Like, that's a very well-developed strategy developed over time based on the fact that we weren't given what we need. So to me, I'm just thinking about a loving approach of looking at my partner and just being like, wow, like that must have been really hard. Like all of what I'm seeing and the way that you're handling this is because you didn't get the love you craved, or your needs weren't being met in whatever way that looked like. And just kind of acknowledging like, oh, like there's some tenderness here.
Yes.
There's some hurt here. There's some wounds here. And I think and I think that's the gift of the Enneagram too, is you begin to like appreciate your partner's journey and why they have the personality that they have, or why they've developed these coping strategies that they have. So I like that idea of sort of like looking at where is this coming from? And then I feel like that introduces more patience.
Yes. And curiosity to maybe ask yourself, how can I, as your partner, show up for you and give you what you might need? And I think in that moment, it's not necessarily on that person to be, their therapist or their support through that. I think it's in having that open communication about, this is what I need in this moment, or this is how I best receive an apology. I need this XYZ in order to feel secure with you. So I think having those conversations kind of opens up the dialogue so that each person can say, okay, when I'm triggered or when we're in conflict, this is what I need from you. And that actually moves you both to more of a secure attachment or secure relationship, which then kind of gives you a step forward to the goal, initially.
Yeah, well, and I love that idea because then you're setting your person up to win. It's like, here's what I need. And then that person has a clear roadmap to meet that. I think in a relationship where there's a desire to love one another and to support one another, I would imagine if you had the same style, it's almost like looking in a mirror. You're like, I got it. I get it. I understand why this is making you anxious. I understand why you're freaking out about this, or you're feeling so passionate about this. And there's something about that that's kind of cool in a way to relate on that. And then I feel like to be able to meet that need for the other person, you get it on like such an intrinsic level of like, I understand why they need this, because you can relate and identify with it as well. So that's a really cool way of just being able to like speak your needs and then meeting that person in that. Okay, let's talk about avoidant and avoidant, because I'm imagining, gosh, this has got to be like so different. I would imagine like people maybe not wanting to communicate. So
yes.
So let's say both partners, you're avoidant, your partner is avoidant. How the heck do you navigate that one? That feels tricky.
Yes. So I think that one is very interesting. But I almost would kind of challenge the need to step back, because a lot of what we do is in a cycle or in a pattern. So if one person is avoidant, it could trigger the other person's avoidance, which basically means that at one point in time, they may not be avoiding at the same time. One could look like a soft pursuer. Which basically means they both have a pattern to avoid, but it's triggered by the other person to some degree. So when that happens, we really look at, okay, what are we protecting? When you avoid or when you may deceive, you're protecting something. There's something that is so true to you that you feel you have to protect or you have to nurture, because there's a chance at which you feel threatened. So in the therapeutic space or in the therapeutic room, I really ask the question of like, what do you feel you have to protect when you begin to step out? Or what do you feel you lose when you begin to step out or withdraw from your partner?
Gosh, yeah. That's why I'm like, it feels tricky in that sense, because it's maybe not as blatant as the anxious and anxious who are like kind of moving towards each other. This is a little bit incognito in a way, but I like this idea of going, okay, what is this about? So this is the shell, and there's a way of protection of something else that's happening. What's the fear? What's behind this behavior? Yeah. And I think, again, when you're dealing with people who are willing and open to learning about their patterns, learning about what they're doing, there can be that curiosity to understand like, oh, I keep doing this, but the truth is that's secondary. What I'm really afraid of is XYZ. And obviously this is like high level stuff we're talking about, but again, it's that self-awareness that we've been talking about so often, is recognizing our patterns and then sort of almost like distilling that to our partner. Like, here's what I've noticed myself doing. And when there's a need to move or a desire to move towards secure, there's space for that, I feel like. And I want to touch on too, like, having that polarity of like one person is anxious, one person is avoidant. So one person is moving in, the other person is moving out. Yes. And this tends to be my pattern. I'm usually the anxious. I tend to connect with partners who are avoidant, sort of opposites attract, that polarity. And that tends to be a strong connection for a lot of people. So when that is occurring, what does the anxious person need to do? And what does the avoidant person need to do? Hey y'all, I'm sure you've been hearing me mention my Fully Alive Circle membership, and you might be wondering what it is and how you can join. So let me tell you a little bit about it. So the Circle membership is a safe place for women to gather together in a heart-centered community to take this deep dive into personal transformation. So it's my online membership where you'll learn how to find yourself again through daily devotional practices. Inside of our private Facebook group, I share resources like guided meditations, yoga practices, essential oil recipes, journal prompts, and so much more that dive into our monthly topic that we explore right here on the Living Fully Alive podcast. And all those resources are delivered to your inbox weekly to help you create powerful change in your life. So if you're looking for an affordable way to continue your journey of living fully alive, then definitely check out the Fully Alive Circle membership. Just go to maryhyatt.com/circle and you can find out all the details and join. All right, now back to this week's episode.
Yes. So I feel like when that actually occurs, so one that may be more anxious is coming closer, and one that is more avoidant feels threatened by the closeness.
Right.
So they avoid, which then triggers the one that is more anxious even more.
Yeah.
So I think the number one thing is going to be awareness on both ends and arriving at a time to actually talk about what's causing conflict. So that may be, okay, I need a break right now, and I'm noticing you want to discuss this even more. I hear you. I'm going to take this break and come back to you in 1 hour. That anxiously attached person hears you passionately care. You're just not at a place where you can receive this information right now. So when you continue to do that type of work in your relationship, it builds trust and it moves that unit closer to secure attachment.
Well, and I know that in my relationship, I've had to say that to my partner. So he goes into shutdown mode, right? And I go, talk to me, tell me what are you feeling? And he's going, literally, like usually nothing. And I'm going, just please, like, say something. Because, of course, in my mind, as an anxious attached person, I'm coming up with all these stories in my mind of what the silence means.
Yes.
And for him, he's literally just processing. Like, he's not in the story of whatever I'm in my head. He is trying to kind of find his footing, find his place. So one of the things that we've done to kind of help navigate that, okay, so you need more time to process, is for me to vocalize and say, hey, if you could just tell me, hey, I need a little time, a little space, I'll come back to you in whatever the amount of time is. That has been, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's been so helpful for us. Is it's like, okay, now I can relax, because I just realized I'm a fast processor. Like I am like already at the end solution in about 2 minutes, where for him, it's different. He's got to kind of go away and deal with that initial, we're getting too close here, and then kind of work through that process to be able to come back and to be present and to listen. But as long as there's sort of like, hey, I'm here with you. I know even in the book, the attached book, I remember reading like that touch, like the avoidant just touching, kind of just saying like, hey, I'm here. And then leaving the situation for more time and more space or whatever it might be. But sort of that kind of like reminder for the anxious, like, hey, I'm here. But honestly, I feel like, and I would be curious if you agree or disagree, but I feel like it's a responsibility of the anxious one to ask for that. Like to say, this is a need that I have. Would you be willing to just communicate you need more space, or to communicate that you'll come back later? Like, I feel like I need to be self-aware enough to know, like, I need my partner to give me that assurance, and then they can go off and go do their thing. But I got to ask for it.
Yes. And I think the thing that I would add to that is, what does this feel like for you? Because I definitely identify with more of an anxious attachment style. So one thing that has really helped me is really thinking about what it feels like for him. I'm thinking about my fiance right now, who is definitely a bit more avoidant than I am. And I think in those moments, he's been able to say, well, this is very uncomfortable for me, which then helps me think about, okay, this feels uncomfortable for you, but for me, it feels great to be able to kind of sort this out and for me to have that confirmation.
Yeah.
So that also helps kind of getting perspective of what your partner is feeling in that moment, because later on when you do reconnect, you can then better support them through their needs.
Right. Yeah, because as I'm talking, I'm like, yeah, okay, I was focusing on myself 24/7 on that regard, like, and being able to put yourself in their shoes and recognize, now I might be feeling anxious. They're actually probably anxious as well, but in a different way.
Yes.
Even though we're not calling it that or calling it avoidant, but that's coming, the avoidant behavior is because of that anxiousness around closeness. Is that right?
Love it. Yes. I think it really kind of goes back to the internalization that's actually like their survival mechanism. So they're going in. They're just kind of going in, which causes them to withdraw from the connection.
Right. Okay. Okay. So I'm thinking about parents who are listening, and I've got mostly women, right? So a lot of moms that are listening.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, is there a way that you've experienced that parents can foster secure attachment? Like, I feel like our parents, at least I'll speak for myself, like my mom, 5 kids, broke as a joke, like doing the best that she could do. Of course, there's going to be areas where it didn't come through, that she wasn't able to meet all of our needs. And there was zero consciousness around even knowing or being intentional about that. But now,
Yes.
as our collective has sort of raised its awareness and consciousness, there are a lot of conscious parents out there. And how amazing to give a child like the gift of creating secure attachment from the beginning. And obviously I know hard things happen and it's not always perfect, but as best as we can, what would be some advice that you would give for mothers in creating how to create secure attachment with their kids?
Yes. So number one, I really want to say that secure attachment is not being the perfect mother or the perfect parent. It's in being able to bounce back from different adversities and things that are going to happen while parenting and through your life as well. So secure attachment is in being able to repair those kind of smaller attachment wounds in those moments, and also having the insight. So what I loved about what you really said and recognized was that it's in being insightful and knowing when you may have not been as present as you desire to be. Let's just be honest, with all of the hats that I really feel like women are wearing these days, men as well, it can really cause us to have a lack of presence. But it's in those moments where you kind of bring it back and you say, wow, I really want to connect with you. I really want to, do this hobby with you. That's a repair right there. So secure attachment is in being able to recognize it and do something about it, but then also listen and be really receptive of your child's concerns.
Yeah, because I think sometimes we think, at least I've seen in old styles of parenting, I don't know how relevant this is now, but like if I go back and think about it, it's if there's a need of a child, it's sort of like, oh, be quiet. Sort of like your role is to be seen and not heard. Or even so much as seeing children as being disrespectful or disobedient. And what they're really doing is kind of like my therapist says, bid for connection. What they're really doing is trying to create connection.
Yes.
And if we as adults can up our level of perspective to see like, oh, this child is communicating to me in their limited way and knowledge of how to do that. What is it that they're after?
Yeah.
Maybe they're feeling lonely. Maybe they're feeling their own fear of abandonment, and they're testing the waters. They're seeing, will my parent hang? Will my parent come back? Will they be there? Can they love and accept me even when I'm quote unquote bad? Mm-hmm. And I love this idea of the being present. And I know that that's a tall order with everything we've got going on. Let's just acknowledge all the moms out there.
Yes.
But I think that if we are on this path of becoming more conscious women and humans, this is part of that work, is seeing how we can re-engage and become more present. So kind of like switching a little bit away from parenting and thinking about adults in relationship and committed relationships. If you are more of an anxious attached temperament style, how in a relationship, or even maybe just by yourself, how can you move towards becoming more secure? Like, what's the roadmap so we can kind of know, like, I should be looking for this or I should be doing this? So some tips for kind of moving forward in becoming more secure if you're anxious.
Yes, I love that question. So I think the number one thing I'm going to go back to is understanding why you respond the way you do. So I think that component is really important because, again, if it is more of a trigger or a trauma that you're responding to that causes anxiety, kind of systematically, meaning you don't have to have a trigger. It's something that it's within your body due to the responses that you've just kind of had over time. That would be a healing process that takes time. So I would reference, really finding a professional who you can connect with and kind of sort those things out, because you definitely deserve to do that with someone else so that you are seen through that process. But I think individually, it's really noting, okay, in relationships, this is what it looks like for me. I might be a little bit more eager to connect. I really might need that connection. So it's awareness of those things and being able to kind of take some of those things in and say, all right, in this moment, I know I really want to connect with this person and be expressive about this concern, but right now I'm going to kind of contain some of those concerns and kind of move into maybe perspective taking. So I think a little bit of the work that you personally can begin doing is it's really awareness of it.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I mean, because I'm just thinking like when you find yourself and you go, ooh, I'm in this pattern, here I go again, I'm getting teed up to kind of have this response.
Yes.
I think it's really beautiful to have that awareness, because then you can go, okay, how can I, if I were secure, what would that look like right now? Like if I was secure, attached, and again, with this new language that we have discussing this, I love that, because it's like, okay, I say this with my clients all the time, unrelated to attachment theory, but people that are dealing with body image issues. If I were feeling confident right now, how would I walk? What would I say? What would my behaviors look like? If I was secure in myself, what would that look like? And it's almost like giving ourselves the opportunity to try on a different attachment style in that moment of going, okay, well, if I was secure, how might I approach this a little bit differently? If I felt more safe, what would that cause me to think or to do? And so I love this idea. It really starts with self-awareness. Like
yes.
That's ground zero.
Yes. And I have to say this too. If you feel anxious, that's a tool. That's a tool, and it's saying, respond to me, respond to this need. So really think about why you're feeling anxious and what has caused you to feel anxious, because I do believe that it's okay to have some level of anxiety or some level of avoidance to a relationship or a person. So really explore the why behind it. And once you get there, if it is reasonable, because I think there are some relationships that have some unhealthy layers where we do need to be aware of those warning signs that our emotions and that our bodies are giving off.
You're so right. I didn't even think of it like that. Like
yes.
that can actually be a healthy response, almost like a little red flag, like pay attention, something's not quite right here. And when, it's kind of like determining whether that trigger is this old trauma wound or is this actually like feedback that I need to listen to in my intuition here that's telling me something.
Yes.
And I think that I'm just thinking like in that pause of when we recognize, hey, I'm anxious. What's this about? I think that that's where we gain that clarity, where we can go, oh, this is old, or this is from a past relationship, or I'm afraid this is going to happen again. Like I know from being divorced, it's like, oh, a lot of what I was dealing with in my next relationship, the relationship I'm in now, it's like, this has nothing to do with my current partner. This is old stuff from my marriage. You know, like this is old stuff, but something that he did or something that he said triggered. And all of a sudden, I'm afraid we're going to repeat this situation. So in that moment, like pausing to go, okay, what do I need here? Like if I were to like reparent or mother myself, like what do I need to feel less anxious? And it may have nothing to do with my partner. Like it might not be him trying to meet that for me. It may be me meeting it for myself.
Yes. Love it. Exactly. That is right.
So because we're talking about relationships this month, and we talked about a couple episodes, we talked about dating. I know that for my single ladies out there, I've got to ask this question because like I would imagine that when you are meeting somebody for the first time and you're dating them to begin with, you can probably pick up on if they are avoidant or if they are anxious kind of from the get-go. And maybe you want to, as you're sort of selecting your partner for the future, maybe you want to choose somebody who's more secure. So what are some of those like telltale signs that somebody is avoidant or anxious that we can sort of like go into a dating situation and go, ooh, yeah, don't want that?
For sure. So I'll start with avoidant. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes one that might be more avoidant can lack vulnerability. They may not feel very open with sharing. So maybe you find yourself asking a lot of the questions. There's also a desire to get close to others, but being afraid of the closeness. So you kind of get a bit of mixed signals. This can look a bit disorganized. But the other component that I feel that we may not have really touched on is self-sabotaging. So if you really come across this person kind of saying, okay, I think I'm done. We had this small fight last night and I just want to be done, and they're sabotaging it, then that could be a telltale sign of an avoidant person trying to cope with maybe a trigger or a relationship.
And I've seen that so many times where like you think it's going great and they're saying they want to be with you and there's this whole thing, and then all of a sudden it just like flips.
Yes.
And you're like, what the heck happened? Like, I thought everything was great. And that to me is like avoidant, right? Like that trigger, and they're just out, like the bolting.
Yes.
See ya. Gone. Stop texting. Ghosting. You mentioned ghosting earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah. Gosh. What is that about? But I think that it's like so helpful. Again, a new language that we have when we go into dating relationships. So just be aware of, like, it's maybe not something that you go, well, all anxious people are bad and I have to avoid that and can't date anybody who's anxious, or I can't date anybody who's avoidant. But I think it's just helpful to kind of know, like, okay, this might be their pattern.
Yes.
And even just so, like, maybe what it would look like if you get into conflict with one another, or you're trying to, just how often you're spending time together. Oh, if you were more anxious, you probably want to hang out every day, and maybe you don't hear from them for a week. Oh, probably avoid it.
Yes.
So I just think it's just helpful to sort of give you like a lens to view it. So just to kind of wrap up, I would love to know for you, like for people who want to dive into this more, are there any resources that you would recommend that have been really helpful for you and for your clients that you would be like, oh, here's a great place to start?
For sure. So if you feel like you kind of want to get an assessment and understand where you are, there is an assessment on Psychology Today that is accredited if you really are looking for more of a self-help an option. But secondary and primary, I would definitely say therapy is an amazing space to be able to kind of do that work with someone else. Because I think that when we're talking about attachment and connection, that is how we heal in relationship. I don't think we can really just heal ourselves and read, these amazing articles and really heal ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that we are all deserving of being known and being seen, and that is what really heals us.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's just like, get into some therapy, people. So if somebody wants to work with you, I don't know, you're going to tell me the laws and the rules as far as, can you see people out of Tennessee? I know you're local here to Nashville. But how do people connect with you if they want to work with you? And can you see anybody, or is it just people local?
Yeah, for sure. So yes, I can see those that could be out of state via teletherapy. Amazingly enough, COVID-19 has really opened up a platform for teletherapy. So even if you're interested in seeing other therapists other than myself, again, Psychology Today is a great resource for connecting those that may be tele-based. But of course, my name is Dominique Braden. That is my profile name, and of course, my name. So feel free to connect with me there.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to link to everything for everybody so they can find you, because my guess is people are going to want to work with you. And I think that what I love about the therapeutic space is that each therapist is different and has different focuses and expertise in different areas. And I love that this is one of the things that you love to do and work with people on. And so I would imagine that if this is something that you're curious about learning more about, then definitely hit up Dominique, because this is her jam. This is what she does. So, thank you so much for this conversation, for your just knowledge and expertise in this. I mean, it's just like, I just learned so much. I can't even imagine, like, if this is the first time I'm hearing about it, just mind blown. So thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for listening.
All right, guys. Well, we will see you next week on a brand new month's topic all about manifestation. So if you are curious about that, absolutely first listen to all the past episodes of this month and then get ready for a brand new topic next month. And we are going to dive deep into creating whatever it is that your heart desires. All right, y'all. See you next week. Bye. Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you got some amazing nuggets to take home and start implementing into your life. And if you're looking for the show notes and links, head on over to maryhyatt.com/show. And if you loved it, why not bring your girlfriends along this journey of becoming fully alive with you? Just give a quick share of this episode to your social channels and enjoy those debriefing convos with your besties. Thanks again, and I can't wait to connect with you next week.